Welcome to my presentation on my paper entitled "A Hammer Only Sees Nails: Why Construction Contractors Monetize Social Value." It's for presentation at Seeds 2020 online conference. My name is Dr. Greg Watson. I wrote this paper with Dr. Anthony Hyam, with both of the School of Science, Engineering and Environment at the University of Salford. Now, the paper obviously goes into a lot more detail and depth, but I'm just going to give a brief overview of the paper really and start on this journey of corporate social responsibility. And these trees illustrate the growth of the concept. So you can trace it back hundreds, thousands of years really, can't you? The idea of businesses doing well and giving back to society. But I'm going to start with a more recent resurgence. 1953, Bowen released a book, The Social Responsibilities of the Businessman, and it's all about welfare, individuals from business being philanthropic and giving back to society. The concept grew, represented by this next level here. It grew in scope, in idea, to embrace aspects of responsible business and get involved in more elements of society. And then this growth, it's dipped slightly, but the general trend over the last 70 years now, coming up to since the publication of Bowen's book, the concept's just grown and grown and grown. Illustrated here by these trees. To most recent developments, and even that's a few years old now, with social value. So social value is now a well-established element of corporate social responsibility. So I say it's going to sit on this tree somewhere. So one branch is going to be dedicated to social value. So the whole tree is corporate social responsibility of a business. Social value is one aspect of that. Now, the Social Value Act 2012 really formalised social value, and it allowed public sector clients to request from contractors or those providing goods and services more value, if you like, that couldn't necessarily align with time, cost and quality. So more criteria in the procurement exercises they're undertaking that roll around what was important to them, what was important to society. So they could get more wider value from procurement, not just the cheapest cost and the shortest time frame to the acceptable level of quality, etc. But this brought with it a lot of problems in that now you have, let's take construction for example, several contractors all competing on time, cost and quality, which is fine, but that's easy to compare. They're all also competing on what they offer for social value. That's where the difficulties arise, because all these different contractors have got to measure and communicate that social value to public sector clients. And that's got to be in a way that the clients first and foremost understand, and then secondly are able to compare. You can compare programs, you can compare costs, and you can compare specifications with relative ease. Comparing social value offers, unless it's the exact same practice measured in the exact same way, it's going to be very difficult to compare. Which leads us on to the problem of measuring measuring social value. And at the heart of this, it's this tension between the objective and subjective nature of social value. Objective in that it has to be measured and communicated, and it has to be done so in a way that can be understood by one client. So several contractors have all got to do it in a way that can be understood by one client for that specific procurement of that project. But then they've also got to communicate that to other clients. So other clients have also got to understand it. But that's very difficult when the concept is so subjective, when it means different things to different people. And there is no firm measure out there of social value. Yet we need to objectify it, we need to measure it and communicate it in an objective fashion because of the parameters, if you like, what we set up around procurement in construction. And it's a bit like the square peg and round hole. How do you make a subjective concept objective? How do you measure it in a way that everyone's going to understand and share that perception and that understanding? Well, the solution, if you like, that's proposed by many contractors and many different third-party tools out there is to do so in a financial way. So a monetary metric, which is fine for some degree into it because it does satisfy the boxes of a metric that everyone understands. You are quantifying a subjective factor by making it into an objective factor, which is finances. Everyone understands financial figures, don't they? So if one contract is proposing £100,000 of social value, another one is proposing £80,000 of social value, it's nice and easy to compare that. But that's from an objective point of view. When you're being subjective, when you're really looking at the heart of social value and you're looking behind the curtain, if you like, this £100,000, £80,000, it can say what you want, can't it? You can make it appear to describe and to say things however you want. You can make one project with one tool have £1 million worth of social value. The same project with a different tool can only get £500,000 of social value. And I've analysed tools and looked at them in detail, and you can really make them say what you want. Different tools can measure the same social value practice and get different financial results. So as for the validity of any objective measures, for me, it's a bit wanting at this minute in time. And ultimately, how do you measure some things like happiness, for example? Like, how do you quantify happiness? What is the correct metric to do that? Is it pounds and pence? Are you £50 happy today? Tomorrow you're £100 happy? So there are issues trying to cram this subjectivity into an objective format so people can understand it. Sorry, pause while I did a cough there. So the ramifications of this decision are not quite known yet, are they? Like, if we're forcing social value into objective measures, do we understand the full ramifications of this? This paper looks to explore why contractors do it, how contractors do it. Do they all objectify this subjective concept? Because it's all right saying they do because these tools exist, but is that something all contractors do? If so, why? How do they engage with social value? And what are the ramifications of objectifying these potentially subjective metrics? So for a simple process starting from sort of an ontological position of constructivism, it led to an interpretivist position, then the need for qualitative data, which we thought would get best through semi-structured interviews. So 20 contractors were contacted, 10 responded positively, so I had 10 interviews, and used narrative analysis as a method to structure the interviews and also analyse the data at the end. And the paper goes into this area a lot more detail than I've done justice here in the 5 seconds I've summarised it. But after all this process, finding this gap in the literature, what did the findings of the research in the paper actually reveal? Well, first of all, that all 10 contractors reported an increased focus on social value. So they all said they focused a lot more on social value over the last few years. But they also said that they would do this even without the Social Value Act in place. However, it's hard to fully establish that into it because it is in place and it is there and it is a driver for clients. So contractors do all believe they engage with it a lot more. And they would do, irrespective of any pushing, if you like, from legislation, from the public sector. So all contractors were involved with and had a need to objectively measure and communicate social value. So they all needed to objectify it in order to win work, in order to be successful at procurement. But the contractor perceptions of social value were subjective. They all had different interpretations and perceptions of social value, and that was from management, from staff, and also from clients, and their clients and other clients influenced their own perceptions. So they all had an objective need, admitted that, but they all had subjective interpretations. So straight away there's a tension there, and it's building on this tension. There are 6 different types of social value measurement tool used. 5 are recognised third-party types that anyone can go and buy off the shelf, if you like. All the measurement tools took an objective approach, and they all used monetary metrics to measure social value. So they all reduced it down to this monetary metric approach. Although when comparing each tool, there was no consistency in how they measured social value. So I sort of gave that away earlier, didn't I? How they all measured social value, the same activity, it was measured differently. So it was inconsistent amongst tools. So that shows, depends what activity you're getting involved in, you can pick the tool to best measure that social value. So one tool will say you hire an apprentice is £10,000 of social value. Another tool will say you hire an apprentice is £20,000 of social value. So you might as well just go and pick the best tool, aren't you, to come and measure, to sell your story the best you can to the client. So again, it's pulling holes in current practice, really, of what we're doing. 7 of the contractors thought that social value could be fully objectively measured. So they didn't quite get, which is understandable on some degree, but they didn't quite understand the subjective nature of social value. They were firmly of the approach of what gets measured gets done, and let's measure social value, let's objectify it, and let's use financial metrics as a rationale and as a tool to measure. Some contractors believe that social value was both subjective and objective, so they understood this tension, they understood there's something you can't measure. However, they didn't really engage with that side you can't measure because it was too hard, so they didn't make any single effort. So only one contractor out of the 10 and that was interviewed that actually understood both the subjective and objective side of social value and actively looking at how they could measure this subjective side. So only 1 out of 10 was actively looking how they could measure social value subjectively. 2 out of 10 acknowledged it needed to be done but weren't interested in doing it at this time because it was too difficult. 7 out of 10 didn't even understand it and thought that financial metrics measured everything perfectly. So they can measure the benefit and happiness of an apprentice, of a litter picker, for example, in financial metrics, and that's all that mattered. So all contractors interviewed only participated in social value practices they could measure objectively, so in financial terms. But that is because the results could then be communicated easily to stakeholders. So it's all driven from the need to communicate it out to have a wider stakeholders in marketing material or to clients to win procurement. And social value practices that couldn't be easily measured were likely to be ignored. So the ultimate ramification of using financial metrics to objectively measure subjective concepts such as social value is that if it can't be measured, it gets ignored. So contractors are less likely to engage with it, less likely to participate in it, even though the benefits could be better for that individual, for that end user, that end participant. If they can't measure that positive benefit, that impacts in financial terms, they're not engaging with it because it's not going to help them win work. So that's the problem this paper reveals, and that's what needs to be addressed and built upon in future. So thank you very much. Our paper, A Hammer Only Sees Nails, Why Construction Contractors Monetise Social Value. It was written by me, Greg Watts, and Anthony Hyam of University of Salford, and I've put my email address on there and a LinkedIn and LinkedIn profile there if anyone wants to connect and we can discuss this research. I'm happy to answer any questions in more detail. Thank you very much.